Tonight, a US admiral is told that can't be trusted after offering this explanation about the bombing of an Iranian school.
The school itself is located on an active IRGC cruise missile base.
Absolutely.
It's more complex than the average strike.
It comes a day after Sky News' investigation into the strike, which happened as the US and Israel launched their war against Iran. We put our own questions to Admiral Cooper.
We have a team in Minab right now. They have seen what happened. They have seen no evidence of a Iranian missile base there. For how long can you hide behind an investigation is happening, sir?
Also tonight, right on the heels of Donald Trump's visit, Vladimir Putin arrives in Beijing. It's a reminder of China's growing clout as Russia's president looks to reaffirm an important friendship. The World Food Programme on how decimated aid budgets and wars are crushing the global humanitarian framework. Training for shadow fleet battles. We're on board to see NATO drills targeting suspect ships. A new alarm at the speed of Central Africa's Ebola outbreak. All of that is ahead in the world with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening and welcome to the programme. For months, the White House and the Pentagon have deflected questions about the strike on a school as the war in Iran began. Today, that shifted. More than 150 people, mostly girls, were killed according to Iran, and the evidence has pointed to an American missile. Sky's Dominic Waghorn was the first international journalist to visit the site. Here's some of his report, which we brought you last night.
The missile struck in the middle of the morning when the school was full of children, causing enormous loss of life. Staff at the school had already realised that Iran was under attack that morning and called parents to take their children home. Most of them didn't get here in time. Survivors say that most of the children, the girls on the upper floor of the school, were moved to that end of the building to a prayer room for their safety. When the missiles struck, they killed many children and teachers on impact, but they also tragically collapsed completely that end of the school, trapping and killing many more.
Dominic Waghorn there. Well, this afternoon, the top US military leader in the Middle East was pressed in Congress for information on the bombing and why the investigation is taking so long. Just have a listen.
So the investigation is ongoing. As soon as it is complete, I'm happy to be as transparent as possible.
We will not take responsibility for something we very obviously did.
So it's a complex investigation. The school itself is located on an active IRGC cruise missile base.
Absolutely.
It's more complex than the average strike. As soon as we're complete, I'm fully committed to transparency, given your important oversight role and the other members here.
Just so you know, and I have an enormous amount of respect for you and an enormous amount of respect for the Pentagon, I do not trust that answer.
Note what Admiral Brad Cooper claimed, that the school was on an active missile site run by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. Previous reports have suggested the strike was accidental due to outdated information about a base near the school. Meanwhile, President Trump has revealed how close he was to launching a new round of attacks on Iran and ending the fragile ceasefire.
I was an hour away. We were all set to go. You're talking about yesterday.
Yes.
We were going to be striking it would have been happening right now. Yeah, it was all done. The boats, the ships are all loaded. They're loaded to the brim. And we were all set to start.
Well, more on that shortly, but first an update from Dominic Waghorn in the Iranian city of Minab, where the school strike happened. He gives his take on what Admiral Cooper said today. Have a listen.
Pretty painful listening to Admiral here sort of wriggling under congressional cross-examination and not answering the question. The question was was America behind the attack on this school that killed at least 150 people, 120 of them children, and he said America does not target civilians. That is not the question he was asked to answer, as he was reminded, and he simply wouldn't answer that question, which will, I think, add to the frustration of people here who say that for almost 3 months now they've wanted answers, and America America will simply not do what it's done in the past in Iraq and Afghanistan, where when all the evidence is stacking up against it, these were American-made Tomahawk missiles. That morning, the Americans were targeting a number of targets in the area. With all that evidence against them, why not just say what they've done in the past, which is, yes, we were behind it. It was a mistake. We're now trying to work out why. We've been to the school a number of times this week, and I can categorically tell you it is a school, or was a school. It's now a pile of rubble. It is not a missile base. It's not on a missile base. It's been a school for at least 10 years. It's marked on maps, has been marked on maps for at least 10 years as a primary school. If you look at it from satellites, you'll see playgrounds, you'll see the markings of football pitches as well. A lot of the kids there, we've spoken to their parents, were soccer mad. So you could see it was a primary school. And we've spoken to, as I say, parents, teachers, nurses, children as well, and we've asked most of them, because there were and have been these reports that it was near or part of a military base. You know, has it been, or is it anywhere near a military base? Have you seen any evidence of military activity? And they've all said no. Now, there are some maps that show it is adjacent to or close to buildings that there are some reports linking to the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and some of those buildings may have connections or may have had connections with the IRGC. But I can categorically tell you that nowhere near the school that we've been to and filmed for almost a week is there any evidence of military activity. It's certainly not on an active IRGC military base, unless that's a bunker deep underground, which I think we would know by now, because there's a big crater in the middle of this school caused by cruise missiles.
Dom Waghorn there. Well, let's go straight to Washington and speak to our US correspondent, Mark Stone. Mark, just getting some of Dom's reactions to what Admiral Cooper had to say, but I'm keen to get your reaction too, because, of course, we've been watching this afternoon, and, of course, in the openers of the show as well, you confronting the Admiral.
Yes, he was here again today. He's based down in Tampa in Florida, which is the headquarters of Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper. But he was up here today for a second day. He was here last week and then back today. Last week he faced questions from senators. Today it was the turn of Congress people on Capitol Hill to ask him the questions that many others want to ask as well. And as you saw in the clips you played, they didn't get a great deal out of him. What they did get, though, was a kind of new version of events, because for the first time he appeared to be suggesting that the school was on the site of an active IRGC missile launch site. As we've just discussed, there is no evidence of that. But that's a new claim, because prior to that, there were some suggestions, again, all kind of conjecture, that perhaps it was a wrongly targeted AI being used perhaps for the targeting. None of this confirmed, because the Pentagon has not revealed anything and just hides behind these comments. So, look, it was an opportunity to try and speak to him directly, to get up close to him and to ask him what happened.
Admiral Mark Stone from Sky News. Can you explain why you cannot reveal what happened in Minab?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
Investigation's ongoing.
For how long can you hide behind an investigation is ongoing, sir? We have a team in Minab right now. They have seen what happened. They have seen no evidence of a Iranian missile base there. For how long can you hide behind an investigation is happening, sir? When will the investigation conclude? Admiral, can you tell us when the investigation will conclude? Can you say anything to the families who died in Minab, sir?
Now, following that encounter, I have had quite an interesting conversation with a source close to the Admiral, who has explained in a little more detail why they are arguing, why they say there is a delay to the result of the investigation. Now, the claim is that they will not jump the gun and announce at any, as Don was saying, they won't say, look, we did it, but we don't know why it happened. They want to wait, so they say, until they have the investigation complete before they reveal the whole thing. And they say that the suggestion I'm getting from sources is that there are different departments involved in the investigation. So a general officer who is not part of CENTCOM is in charge of the investigation. So it's not quite like they're marking their own homework. There is an officer who is not part of the department within the military who is prosecuting this war. That officer is in charge of the investigation. He's gathering evidence from all sorts of different agencies, including probably the likes of the CIA, and they are waiting for all that to come together before they reveal anything. But it doesn't answer why this is taking quite so long. This strike was back in February, the end of February. It is now May, and we have absolutely no answers.
Yeah, and you know, when you look at previous US strikes in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, investigations have been concluded within weeks. So the fact that, as you say, this has taken so long is what is you know, shifting from the usual standard US response to these things. But Mark, I just want to shift your attention away from that and focus on what Donald Trump has been saying as well today, because yesterday, you told us that he had called off the strike on Iran, which was planned for today. He gave us a little bit more detail around that.
Yeah, the president gave an impromptu tour of his ballroom site, the site of the old East Wing at the White House, demolished now. A ballroom is being built. And as part of that tour that he gave, he did answer some questions about Iran. He put a bit more detail on that post that we had yesterday, where he said that because of conversations with leaders of Gulf Arab countries, he had decided to call off a strike that he had, up until that point, decided would happen today. There is, behind the scenes, we know, a lot ongoing in terms of negotiations. We know, too, that the likes of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, perhaps UAE as well, are very concerned about what the blowback would be, the impact, the retaliation would be of a resumption of American airstrikes on Iran. They are in the targeted firing line from Iranian retaliation. I think it's clear now that behind the scenes, they have put some pressure on the Americans, certainly the Saudis, and said, look, don't go ahead with this. Don't resume this conflict now. It's also quite helpful for the president to be able to lean back on that pretext that, you know, them saying, don't do this now, because frankly, he does not want to resume this conflict. What he wants is for Iran to capitulate. What he wants is an off-ramp. What he wants is all this to come to a conclusion, not least because the Strait of Hormuz is still such a massive problem economically for all of us. But he doesn't want to be seen to be backing down. He is in a corner right now.
Mark, as always, thanks so much. Let's speak now to retired Lieutenant Colonel Rachel E. Van Dingham, who was a judge advocate in the U.S. Air Force and former senior legal advisor at U.S. Central Command during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel, for joining us here on the programme. I just want to talk about the situation in Minab. We, of course, have a reporter on the ground who's been, speaking and getting testimony from the families. It's clearly a school, and an investigation, as you know, has been launched. It's now been 3 months and still no real answers. And we heard what Admiral Cooper said today. I just want to get your reaction to the way that he framed this investigation and said it was complex.
Well, I mean, it is complex, but the United States military does battle damage assessment after each and every single strike, which is why Secretary Hegseth has been able to explain that how many missile launchers, Iranian missile launchers, for example, the United States has destroyed. So the United States military has had the information, I think the basic root cause of this investigation for quite a while. There was a preliminary report that was leaked already that said that the mistaken strike was based on reliance on outdated intelligence. So yes, there does need to be greater investigation into why was this outdated intelligence relied upon, but it boggles the mind to think that it would take 3 months. We've seen earlier investigations, as you've mentioned, earlier strikes in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, in which civilians have been tragically killed. And the United States was much more forthright. They've at least acknowledged the strike was ours. They explained what happened. They don't have to reveal intelligence information, but explain what happened, and then actually apologized. We haven't seen an acknowledgement never mind an explanation, nor an apology yet. And the American people deserve that, and so do U.S. service members. U.S. service members do not want to kill children. They do not want to kill innocent civilians in war. So they need to be able to rely on those processes that are supposed to be in place. But the Admiral Cooper's statements today, as well as last week, really don't give us much reassurance that those processes are actually being robustly followed, or at least fixed, because something tragically went wrong here. And we still don't have an explanation as to what. The United States military is incredible. It can do amazing things. It can tell us a little sooner what went wrong here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is what's so disturbing about this particular case, that very early on, despite the confusion and the fog of war, it became clear that it was a Tomahawk. The fact that immediately afterwards the administration pointed the finger of blame at the regime, and now 3.5 months on, the usual practices and standards that we've seen in the past, because of course, in war, these things can happen, these sorts of mistakes. We saw in that drone strike in Kabul, when the US was departing Afghanistan in 2021, when tragically a family was killed, a number of children were killed. And initially, there was an investigation. Within just a couple of weeks, that investigation was concluded and the families were offered compensation. The fact that there is zero accountability or any information that's out is, I think, what's so disturbing about this particular case.
It is very disturbing because it highlights that this administration doesn't seem to care, that they're putting the U.S. military service members' souls, honestly, their morality in harm's way, and they're undermining the trust of the American people, even to a greater extent, because they're not doubling down on why it's so important to explain that we don't kill civilians in war and that we do everything possible to not kill civilians in war. Not only is there a legal obligation not to kill civilians in war and to do everything we can not to minimize the impact on civilians, there's a moral and ethical obligation that every American feels, that if we're going to go to war, we're only going to kill the fighters on the other side, and we're going to leave their families and their children alone. And there just seems to be a lack of caring, not only a lack of caring, but an institutional dismantling of the processes that were put in place over the last several years as part of the lessons learned from Afghanistan and Iraq. So the civilian harm mitigation and response program that the Biden administration was robustly implementing, they weren't doing it on their own. Congress told them to do this. And why? Because of lessons learned that if we kill civilians in war, we don't do well in achieving success. And so this administration is showing it lacks a commitment to actually fighting the right way, the moral way. And that's disrespectful to the U.S. service members and to the American people.
Yeah, as you say, there are rules of war which the United States, is seemingly supposed to be following. And so by doing this, do you believe then that it also damages the United States' reputation internationally when it doesn't hold itself responsible or accountable for such incidents?
Yes, the United States is losing legitimacy and credibility. The United States helped craft these laws. These laws were done in a pragmatic sense, not only because we want to minimize suffering in war, but it's because we also want to win war, and we believe we can win war without killing little girls while they're at school. And so the United States goes around and has part of its soft power around the world, saying, "Look, fight wars the way we do. We do it professionally. We do it surgically. We do it in a precise manner." Precise means we kill the bad guys, we take out their weapon systems, and we leave schools and hospitals and mosques and churches alone. And this administration, I would have loved to have seen Admiral Cooper say, we investigate each and every single allegation of civilian harm, and we corroborate or we fail to corroborate whether or not it happened, and we incorporate lessons learned. We have not gotten that kind of reassurance from this administration. It's not hard to say. I wish Admiral Cooper would say it.
Lieutenant Colonel, we're really grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, hosting the US president last week and now Russia's leader. All top-level diplomatic roads lead to Beijing at the moment. Xi Jinping saw Donald Trump as he battles an unpopular and costly war in Iran. But if Trump was hoping for help, he came away with nothing. President Putin arrives with even greater problems. His war in Ukraine has stalled on the battlefield, and a recent European intelligence assessment suggested growing paranoia within the Kremlin. And now, a report in the Financial Times that Xi Jinping told President Trump that Putin might regret his Ukraine invasion. That's been denied by China's foreign ministry. Have a listen.
The Chinese side has already issued a statement regarding the meeting between the leaders of China and the US. The information mentioned is inconsistent with facts and is purely fabricated.
It's a spokesperson for the Chinese foreign ministry. Well, our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett looks at what Vladimir Putin hopes to achieve from his trip to China.
Well, the timing of this visit has certainly raised eyebrows. It comes less than a week after Donald Trump's own high-profile trip to China. We've been told that this timing was not deliberate. The Kremlin has made a point of saying that. We've been told that the date was set for Putin's visit back in February with Xi Jinping, and that Donald Trump was supposed to visit in March, April time. So it's apparently an accidental clash of dates. But the fact that these trips and visits have fallen back to back will make for a fascinating comparison between them. We've seen already that Vladimir Putin enjoyed the same kind of welcome at the airport as Donald Trump, the same red carpet treatment, the flag-waving students. But what will the body language be like between Xi and Putin? What about their interaction, the statements and readouts from either side? How will that compare to what we saw last week when Donald Trump was in town? And it's a comparison that Vladimir Putin seems to have been leaning into already. In a video address ahead of his departure released here, he talked up the special relationship between China and Russia, their mutual understanding, their support of one another's core interests. He didn't mention the US or Donald Trump specifically, but it felt like a comparison was implied there, all about cooperation rather than competition. Have a listen.
Today, Russia-China relations have reached a truly unprecedented level. Their special nature is reflected in the atmosphere of mutual understanding and trust, a commitment to pursuing win-win and equitable cooperation, conducting respectful dialogue and supporting each other on matters affecting the core interests of both countries, including protection of sovereignty and state unity.
As for what Vladimir Putin wants to get out of this trip, I think he's after two things. One is more economic support from China. Ever since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, trade with China has kept the Russian economy afloat and helped Moscow sustain its war in Ukraine. But right now, the Russian economy is under strain. It's struggling. So I think Putin wants to shore up that economic support. I think he wants to expand energy exports to China. And he sees an opportunity right now with the crisis in the Middle East, which is putting pressure on China's own energy supplies. So that's one thing. The second thing, I think, is that he wants to reaffirm China's diplomatic support for for Russia, because right now Putin is under a degree of pressure. He no longer has the ear and attention of Donald Trump like he did, say, 6-12 months ago. Trump is totally focused right now on the Middle East. And there's a sense that the US and the West is trying to drive a wedge between China and Russia, to urge Beijing to put pressure on Moscow to end its war in Ukraine. So I think Putin is hoping that this visit will act as a riposte to all of that, to show the rest of the world that he still has Beijing's backing no matter what.
That was Ivor Bennett there. Well, joining me now is former UK Ambassador to Russia, Sir Laurie Bristow. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. I just want to turn your attention, firstly, to that report that came out in the Financial Times that Xi Jinping had said to Donald Trump that perhaps Vladimir Putin would come to regret the invasion of Ukraine. The Foreign Ministry in China has denied these reports. But how likely is it that that conversation took place? Because clearly there is some kind of leak somewhere.
Yeah, well, it is true, of course, that the Chinese Foreign Ministry almost immediately rebutted the claim, which I assume came out of the American system somewhere. Really, who knows what was actually discussed in that meeting? But for some reason, somebody chose to brief it out. I can't really give a good answer to why. Maybe it was just wishful thinking that Putin is actually ready to do a deal over Ukraine. If that's the case, I don't see any evidence of that at all.
Yeah, obviously, increasingly, Russia is the junior partner in this, and they need the Chinese, and they need the Chinese approval. Even sort of the week before the invasion of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin signed this sort of pact memorandum with Xi Jinping at the time, you'll remember, where they pledged loyalty without any boundaries to each other to reaffirm that friendship. Do you think that is as strong today as they tried to display then?
Well, certainly the Russian side likes to play it up as friendship without limits, and I think the timing of the Xi Jinping-Putin summit is extremely important, coming less than a week after the Trump-Xi summit. I mean, the fact is that it's a mutually advantageous relationship between China and Russia. They both have something that the other side needs. So I expect one of the things that they'll be discussing is energy supplies. China is now the biggest buyer of Russian oil. Russia needs the revenue from that those sales in order to finance Mr. Putin's war against Ukraine. But I would expect that if they do make progress, for example, on gas supplies, the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, the Chinese are going to drive a pretty hard bargain on that. They always have in the past. They're not going to give Mr. Putin something for nothing. What they also both need, though, I think, is the political relationship. And that's primarily, I think, for both of them, about demonstrating that there are alternative centers of power in the world to the United States. And they both, for their similar reasons, want to undercut that. The Russians, of course, speak about that in terms of the global majority. The Chinese, I think, take a slightly different view of their foreign relations from Russia. But the last point, I think, just to make is that although the Chinese don't want Mr. Putin to fail in his war in Russia, nor have they gone all in the last 4 years to make sure that he prevails. And I think one of the reasons for that is that China has other interests to protect, including, of course, the relationship with the Europeans, which is of critical importance to China, and where the Europeans, the UK included, find Mr. Putin's war on Ukraine deeply threatening to our own security.
Yeah, and when you look at the war and what's happening in the battlefield, 4 years on, I remember standing at the beginning of this war in Ukraine talking about when Russian forces would take over Kiev, not if. And now you see them struggling to be able to even take parts of the Donbass. I mean, it's clear that this war has stagnated, and the meat grinder that is Russia's war, the State Department has put out the numbers, and it's horrifying when you think about some of these stats, with 15 to 20,000 Russian troops killed each month.
Well, the numbers are just staggering. I mean, the fact is that the Russians are taking enormous casualties for not very much gain in terms of ground seized from Ukraine. Indeed, in the last month or so, they've actually started going backwards in some respects. I wouldn't read too much into that. I think the war is still very much in a stalemate. But there are other things going on as well. We're seeing signs of discontent in Russia, not yet, I think, serious cracks in the elite. But for example, the decision to largely close down the internet last week and the week before, it's starting to generate, vocal public opposition. The big development in the last week or so, though, was the real humiliation, I think, of Mr. Putin's Victory Day parade on the 9th of May. So I've been to that parade probably 5 or 6 times. Usually it's an enormous line of tanks and missiles and soldiers and aeroplanes going overhead. This time the tanks and the intercontinental ballistic missiles weren't there. Partly, I think, because they're just not available. I mean, a lot of them have been destroyed in the war. But I think rather more than that, because Mr. Putin was genuinely afraid that the Ukrainians might attack that parade and cause real humiliation. This matters for 2 reasons. One is that, of course, that parade is all about demonstrating Russia's military might, and trying to hold a parade without demonstrating the military might is a problem. The other is the propaganda purpose of the parade. It's all about building on the story of the Soviet Union's defeat of Nazism in what they call the Great Patriotic War, the Second World War, which is undoubtedly true. But more than that, it's about legitimizing Mr. Putin's rule over today's Russia, and particularly his actions in Ukraine, where the war has been framed in terms of a war against Nazism. And I think the real sting in the tail with this was Mr. Zelensky giving Mr. Putin permission to hold his parade.
Yeah, well, we're really grateful for your analysis and your thoughts. So, Laurie Bristow, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, we've just got some breaking news to bring you. Arsenal have been crowned Premier League champions after Manchester City failed to win against Bournemouth this evening. It's the first time the North London club has won the league in 22 years. So you can see some of the fans there, excited fans. Let's just have a little listen in. Fans there. As I said, the North London club has won the league for the first time in 22 years. Let's bring in our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, who joins me now live on the line. And Rob, some very happy fans in my household tonight. This is a massive win for Arsenal.
It is. It's been an agonising wait for so many Arsenal fans, waiting 22 years to win the Premier League again after 3 successive second-place finishes. They always seem to be falling short, never managing to get over the line. And as you look at those scenes from outside the Emirates Stadium, a stadium that didn't even exist the last time Arsenal won the Premier League in 2004, all those later years of Arsene Wenger that they had to wait. Ultimately, actually one of Wenger's former players, Mikel Arteta, coming in. And it's taken him 7 years almost, but there he has managed to take Arsenal back to the summit yet again in the challenge of Manchester City, who do have far greater financial resources. Arsenal managing to top the table with a game to spare, so there won't be any last day anxieties, and they've had a helping hand from Manchester City, because it is Manchester City drawing tonight at Bournemouth 1-1, which means that those Arsenal fans can now celebrate. City had to win to keep the title going down to the final day, but instead they have done it, and it has been quite a season for them, because they've still got the Champions League final to come, so they could do a double, and they'd hope to replicate the scenes that they saw there at the Emirates last year when the women's team won their Champions League. And for Mikel Arteta, he'd faced the doubts and perhaps questions if he could get over the line to be able to finally turn them into champions again. But he won the FA Cup in 2020. It's been a long wait for him to try to lift a second trophy with Arsenal. But those Arsenal fans, they're absolutely delighted, finally able to let their full outburst of emotion show, because in 2020 they won the FA Cup. There were still parts of lockdown restrictions as well, so they couldn't celebrate anything like that. And also a brief moment of joy in these troubled times for one Arsenal fan in particular, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
Absolutely. Rob, as you say, I mean, Arsenal fans were on tenterhooks this evening, waiting to see what the outcome was. And, of course, Manchester City failed to win against Bournemouth, and the result being Arsenal winning the first Premier League title for 22 years. We're just looking at some of these live images coming in from North London of these very, very excited fans. Rob, can you still hear me?
Yes, I mean, you see all those fans there. This is what fans wait for, and it makes up for them perhaps some of those difficult moments when they're enduring the struggles through the teams, the years that they're out of the Champions League even. And they haven't been able to spend anything like their rivals have at times, having had to fund the cost of that Emirates Stadium that they're in now. And yet they have managed to do it. And think of some of the players who've just been involved in this. Quite an English core to this success as well, with Declan Rice, and so many of Eze as well, who joined last summer from Crystal Palace as well, and Bukayo Saka as well, such a young talent who's managed to help Arsenal take this final step over to be crowned champions again, and to do it without those sort of final day nerves that perhaps might come into play, and against a Manchester City side that was trying to deliver a final Premier League trophy for Pep Guardiola. We know he is now leaving on Sunday after that final match of the season. He won't leave with a 21st trophy, just the FA Cup last weekend. But really, Mikel Arteta does owe a lot to Pep Guardiola as well. He honed his managerial talents while serving as an assistant under Guardiola before stepping up from his shadows in 2019 to take the Arsenal job. And it wasn't easy replacing Arsene Wenger when he retired in 2018. He'd been there for 2 decades, and his successor Unai Emery struggled, although he does have a Europa League final himself with Aston Villa tomorrow night. And for Mikel Arteta, such a young coach who's such a skillful player, he's managed to turn into a really a manager who's really managed to steadily prove himself at this very highest level. In his first managerial job, he's managed to win the Premier League, and it ends Arsenal's long drought, having waited 2004, a very different era in English football for sure, when Arsenal did last manage to win the title. But they have made some crucial signings, with Odegaard in particular, Gyökeres, a very expensive striker brought in as well. But, you know, particularly the addition of Declan Rice as well, him coming in from West Ham in recent years, able to finally build this strong core of a team that's managed to take them to the title. And those Arsenal players will be somewhere celebrating. We can't quite see them. Well, interesting to see if they were all together necessarily enjoying this moment. They did beat Burnley 1-0 last night at the Emirates. That pushed them to the brink of the title. And those Arsenal fans, this is the pure joy, perhaps all the years of misfortune, misery for some, anger at the lack of success for many of them. It will make up for all those difficult days, the fact that they do have the Premier League trophy once again, and they know it will be presented to them on Sunday when they are at Crystal Palace for the final match of the Premier League season. But then it's on to the Champions League final against Paris Saint-Germain in Budapest, because they can still now become champions of Europe for the first time and land what would be quite a memorable double for them, something Arsene Wenger never achieved at Arsenal, winning the Champions League. Mikel Arteta can still add European glory to this Premier League success, but for now it will be a chance for the Arsenal players to celebrate after all the nerves and tensions of this season, as it looked like slipping away for them, as Manchester City could have caught them, having lost at City just a month or so ago. But in the red haze there outside the Emirates Stadium, they'll be parting deep into the night, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob, thank you so much. Some very excited Arsenal fans there. Now, it's one of the global impacts of the Iran war that has been forgotten, the fight against food insecurity. The Trump administration's Operation Epic Fury has fueled a global hunger crisis affecting millions of people while gutting US humanitarian aid contributions. The figures are stark. The US has cut its international humanitarian aid from $14 billion in 2024 to $4 billion in 2025. So far this year, the Trump administration's global humanitarian aid contributions add up to only around $2.4 billion. The World Food Programme projects that some 45 million more people could face acute food insecurity if the Iran war continues through June, exceeding the record levels when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022.
70% of its food needs, which comes from outside. A lot of this comes through the Straits of Hormuz. And it's not just food, but also fuel. And the issues that are going on right now in the Straits of Hormuz is causing a lot of congestion and blockage. So our supply chain has been blocked, it has been delayed. Initially, it was about a week delay. Now it's about between 2 and 3 weeks in delays in getting things to come through. And so we have increase in time delays, which is not good for our supply chain. We have increase in fuel costs, which have translated into significant inflation. Fuel costs have gone up in Somalia by about almost 108% just in the last 3-4 weeks. Food prices have gone up. So what is happening is that it's having a really detrimental effect on food access in Somalia right now.
I'm joined now by the Deputy Executive Director of the World Food Programme, Carl Sco. Thank you so much, Carl, for joining us here on the programme. We're just listening there to your colleagues. You know, when we think about the closure or the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, we often hear about the energy crisis that it has caused. But seldom do we talk about the food insecurity side of this because, you know, things like fertilizer, all the food that has to go through there, and frankly, all of these ships just sitting there day after day for almost 3 months.
Yeah, it's really hitting us in two ways. Number one is our ability to respond to hunger, and the second is that it's driving up the needs even further from what is already historic levels. If I take the example of Sudan, I was just there. I mean, a country that is really struggling, the largest humanitarian crisis we have, the largest hunger crisis that exists right now. You know, first, our ability to operate, we are already in a situation where the needs are far beyond the resources we have. But now our running costs are up 20 to 30%. So because of the fuel cost that has gone up. So we're able to reach fewer people, help fewer people with the resources available. And secondly, the supply chain, the ripple effects. It's not necessarily only if you have ships stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. It's that this has had ripple effects across the globe. So for us to bring, you know, a ship of rice from India to Sudan, it takes 3 to 4 weeks longer. But the real serious issue here is that this is also now driving up needs. So in a place like Sudan, people are already spending everything they have on food. And there is a close correlation between the price of fuel, energy, and food. So if the energy price goes up 40%, which is the case in Sudan, the food price follows. And so people eat 30 to 40% less. And our expectation is that if the price of a barrel of oil remains above $100 until July, another 45 million people across the globe will be pushed into acute hunger.
And this, of course, comes on top of the fact that there was an aid funding shortage. You know, every time I've spoken to you, your colleagues, others in the humanitarian world, they've been saying, look, it's going to be a harsh winter in Afghanistan if food doesn't get there. Now you add to it other countries, like Lebanon, for example. I know you just got back from Beirut. I was in Beirut. These are places that are being directly impacted by the war, but a shortage in funding and aid as well, which has also had a direct caused a challenge.
Like I said, we've never seen as many hungry people in the world ever in history. Over 300 million people, and 70 to 80% of that is driven by conflict. So when you have a new shock, like in Lebanon, you have another million people now displaced who are also acutely food insecure. We were able there to working closely with the government to step up, and we're supporting hundreds of thousands. First, the people in the shelters, but also with cash to those who are living with their family and friends. But yes, it is a perfect storm, really, where also funding is coming down. So while donors are stepping up in Lebanon, for example, in a place like Afghanistan, which I just visited, you know, we are about 8 to 10% funded. It is a malnutrition crisis in Afghanistan. 5 million children and mothers are suffering from malnutrition. And the support to help them survive is just not there. I was at a clinic, hundreds of women with their small children on their arms lined up to get nutrition supplements to address this malnutrition. We had none, and UNICEF had none, so they had to turn back. They'd walked 2-3 hours, and the desperation in the air, the desperation in their voices, it's something that really stays with me.
Carl, how do you change this situation? Because as you say, we haven't seen this many hungry people in history, which, it blows the mind when you think about the state of the world. Actually, people are getting, the poverty levels are rising. It shouldn't be this bad.
Well, number one, we need to do away with these wars. No more wars, and end to the ones that we have, because that is really what is driving these historic levels of hunger. But secondly, we also can, WFP can help people. You know, in Sudan, we reach 5 million people almost every month. In Gaza, we provide food to almost the entire population every month. So we have a system that is efficient, effective, but it's just the funding that is the problem. And if you compare that to all the money that is spent on war or on defense, I mean, it's peanuts, frankly. There are reports that, you know, the war on Iran costed some $2 billion per day. Our ask for over 100 million people for a year is 13 billion. So that's less than a week of war in Iran. So, you know, short of ending these wars, you know, step up, provide us the money so that at least we can make sure the children are not dying of hunger.
That isn't happening, though. When you look at the United States and the cut in funding and programs like funded by USAID, I mean, that, frankly, that is where it's being cut. Even here, foreign aid, you know, was slashed in a massive way.
Yeah, you know, last year we saw a cut in our program of 40%. We had to let go of 5,000 colleagues, but more importantly, you know, millions of people were cut off our programs, including in areas where people are already hungry. We were taking from the hungry now to give to the starving. And we know that more people will then be starving down the road. No, it's true. And we are worried now as another impact of higher energy prices that, you know, domestic budgets in Europe elsewhere are going to be pressured and contributions are going to decrease even further. So we are really in that perfect storm where, you know, needs keep going up and the money is coming down. So we need to break that somehow, and I hope, you know, that shows like yourself putting focus on these situations will help mobilize the public support we need.
Talk us through some of these tough decisions you're having to make as an organisation. The fact that you are going to certain areas and thinking, well, we're just going to have to redirect it because it's worse in this particular area.
I mean, in Afghanistan, there are, you know, many problems. One is the funding. The other has been that we have been struggling with supply chain because the border to Pakistan has been closed. So we've not been able to bring our supplies in, and that's also why this clinic was empty. Otherwise, we would always prioritize, you know, women-headed household with many children, especially when children are malnourished like the ones I saw. But even there, you know, we have had to make the choice of saying, okay, if we don't have money for all the women-headed households in Afghanistan, do we take the women with more than 5 children? Well, you know, they are certainly more desperate, but the women that are left with less than 5 children that are not getting any support. So that's the kind of level, you know, we are cutting. We have this rating system, IPC4, IPC5, 5 starvation, 4 is emergency levels. We always prioritize those who are, you know, in starvation, of course. But when it comes to emergency level, we have now to choose, you know, who to help and who to let be. And as I said, what happens then is that, you know, quickly they move into that starvation level, and there is a lot of damage, if not death, that is done.
And if things don't change, what's your prediction?
Well, we will keep up the fight at WFP. I mean, we go everywhere. Every war zone on the front lines, you will find us. And we have the best possible staff you can imagine. But certainly it's tough because it's also a dangerous time to be a humanitarian. You know, we lost more colleagues than ever last year. This year is looking terrible as well. There is no accountability. So, you know, we have the teams, we have the capacity. We know how to do this, but we need the funding and we need an end to this war and we need the political backing to make sure there is accountability when our colleagues are killed.
Carl Scow, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, more deaths and suspected cases of Ebola as the US issues travel warnings for 3 African countries.
Okay, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, eh?
Let's go. Watch, wait, right, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Oh my goodness. Whoa, oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera, turn around and go away. Thank you very much.
Okay, but
Listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live. I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Those vivid colours of summer have faded now, but the trauma for everyone who witnessed what happened here hasn't gone away.
Devastation. We lost 3 of them.
Ruda Cabana's guilty pleas mean they won't have to relive what they saw in court, but everyone here tells you they'll carry it for the rest of their lives. You see people running red lights time after time after time. This is an offence that sometimes has the most awful of consequences.
When you speed through a pedestrian crossing, there is a risk that you could batter somebody to death. She filled our lives with light. She was innocent, she was happy.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
He had a beautiful death. He fell asleep in my arms. This is about a dying person's choice to die peacefully when they want to, on their terms.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're just talking about how aid cuts are worsening world hunger, and it's being suggested that cuts have left the world less prepared for disease outbreaks like Ebola, which is spreading in Central Africa. At least 130 people are known to have died in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the World Health Organization says it's worried at how quickly people are falling ill. Our Africa correspondent, Yusra El-Bagir, has more.
One of the world's deadliest viruses has been found in one of the world's most insecure regions. A highly lethal strain of the Ebola virus has hit the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There are hundreds of suspected cases and dozens of deaths. Here's what we know so far. The epicenter of this latest outbreak is Ituri province. It's a region that's known for gold mining and densely populated towns, but also for insecurity. There are rival armed groups that launch regular attacks on the civilian population. And then there are also terrorists aligned with the Islamic State. Now the civilian population have yet another risk to their lives, a highly fatal strain of the Ebola virus and a community that is very difficult to contact trace. The first patient in this outbreak is yet to be identified, and public health officials are concerned about how they will manage to contain the outbreak without knowing who exactly has been exposed. Supplies are being sent by the World Health Organization to Ituri to try and facilitate the treatment centers that have been set up. The National Health Minister arrived to the capital of the province and is urging people to access treatment sites for free treatment. But we have been hearing that people have been going to places of worship and to witch doctors over medical facilities because of issues around community education, but also because of a lack of trust in an infrastructure that is seen to be quite poor.
I'm deeply concerned about the scale and the speed of the epidemic.
Now, health officials say because they've had so many outbreaks, they can manage this crisis. But this strain in particular may make it difficult, but also the location. There's a lot of movement of people, not only within the region, but also to neighboring countries. The epicenter of the outbreak, Ituri province, is close to both Uganda and South Sudan, and there have already been 2 cases of Congolese nationals infected by this strain of Ebola in Uganda, with one of the patients dying from the disease. Rwanda has also closed its border with the eastern Congolese city of Goma after at least 1 case was identified there. The World Health Organization is urging neighboring countries to keep their borders open to allow for a coordinated response to the outbreak. We spoke to the country director of the World Health Organization in the DRC, who's on the ground in Ituri. What do you need to contain this outbreak and save as many lives as possible?
Oh my God. We need more people. We need more professional. We need to be able to mobilize the Congolese expert. One of the added value of the Democratic Republic of Congo is that there is a lot of knowledge about Ebola and a lot of expertise in Ebola response.
Funding cuts will impact how resourced emergency responders will be in terms of dealing with this outbreak. And the end of USAID means that research and infrastructure that has been helpful for the DRC in previous outbreaks will no longer be available. And a community that is suffering from intense insecurity now has another threat to their lives.
That's Yusra El-Bagir. Well, that's it from me and the team this evening. But we're going to take you back to those images from a pub in North London, the moment that Arsenal fans learnt that they had been crowned the Premier League champions after Manchester City failed to win against Bournemouth this evening. So you can see very, very excited Arsenal fans there. It's the first time that the North London club has won the league in 22 years. So Arsenal crowned Premier League champions for the first time in 22 years after second-placed Manchester City were held to a 1-1 draw by Bournemouth side bound for Europe. So a big moment there for Arsenal fans celebrating in North London. First time in 22 years. We'll leave you with these images. Good night.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming. It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?